Hi everyone, I'm Sanjana and I have Erik Mansur with me today to talk about competitive intelligence. Hi Erik, thanks so much for joining me today.
Sanjana, it is a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me on All About B2B Marketing.
Yeah, it's my pleasure too. And Erik is currently the VP Product Marketing at Crayon, and he's a passionate marketing leader with more than 15 years of experience spanning across product, marketing, and operations. So, Erik, welcome again, and shall we get started?
Let's go. I'm very excited to talk with you.
Awesome. So my first question is, like, I know gathering competitive intelligence can be daunting because there are countless roads to explore, right? So how and where do we get started?
Gosh, it's a good question. I think a lot of young companies, they begin their competitive intelligence journey with either one of two avenues. The first is using field intelligence. So if they've got a sales team that is public facing, whether it be outside or inside sales, and they're talking to their prospects, and they're catching wind of what it is their competitors are doing. A product marketer, somebody who's trying to create a competitive intelligence program from scratch, will try to put a framework or a foundation in place to capture that field intelligence and then distill it down and then bring it back up into the organization. So the first avenue they could take would be just getting anecdotal information from sales or customer success or even their executive leadership who is having conversations while kite surfing or whatever. And then the other avenue they could potentially pursue is trying to build a rudimentary digital footprint. And what I mean by that is when you're working in the enterprise space or even mid-market to SMB, your competitors are creating, whether willingly or unknowingly or not, a digital footprint. It's everything from changes to your website, blog posts, social media posts, filings with the government, you name it. Those type of things exist out there on the internet and are ultimately searchable. So what a lot of younger competitive intelligence professionals, product marketers will do as they're trying to start this discipline is they'll try to start creating that digital footprint, a method for capturing that intel. So monitoring their social feeds or doing Google alerts or things of that nature. So it's either one of two paths because it's really hard to do both at the same time. That's generally how a product marketer just starting out in competitive intel will give it a go. Most of the time, you're going to get more concrete information, but it's going to be harder to find with the digital footprint side of things. And perhaps you'll actually get even more actionable information, but you may have to verify it. You may have to hear it 2 or 3 times in order for it to really be true and be an actionable piece of intel on the field intel side. But either way, that's sort of one of the two ways that a burgeoning or younger CI program starts.
Okay, and how long should a product marketer invest in finding out, doing this research? Like, should it take a week or should it take a month? How long do you think should we invest in time?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of competitive intelligence programs that you don't actually see actionable data for weeks and months after the report or whatever is compiled, right? I think what my company's philosophy is competitive intelligence should be almost real time. You can't really wait until the end of a week or the end of a month, the end of a quarter to have something in the hands of those people who can do something with it, right? But for those people who aren't using a real-time competitive intelligence tool like what my company does, it's entirely possible that you're coming out with updates to an existing set of frameworks, an existing dossier once a month, once every 2 months. The cadence really is ultimately up to the workload of the person itself, the willingness or the desire, the need within the organization for more relevant, up-to-date competitive intel, and also the market itself. I mean, it's entirely possible that it's a company that exists in a not really as competitive market as others, and in that way, that sort of lessens the urgency a little bit for these constant series of updates. It's my opinion that as the stakes are getting higher and as more as more players enter the space, particularly in the CPG, the e-commerce areas, like there's always a competitor that's like right on your tail. Like knowing what's going on very quickly, very up to date on a weekly basis is often very, very valuable, particularly for an overstretched, overtaxed, overworked sales team who just needs to be able to win those deals, and a product team that needs to be able to develop a differentiated product roadmap with some velocity.
Okay. And at what stage do you think a company should begin investing in competitive intelligence?
I think a company should begin investing in competitive intelligence once they recognize that there is a threat to either their success or there is somebody ahead of them in line that's doing better than they are. It's entirely possible that you're the ultimate disruptor, right? You're a company that literally created a market on its own, and there's nobody behind you and there's nobody ahead of you, and that's possible. You know what? Competitive intelligence may not be as an important thing to invest in. But the vast majority of companies all over the world oftentimes exist within a market, and that market seems to intimate that there are more than one choice or option for potential buyers. So I think really when a company should invest in any form, even the smallest, slightest form of competitive intelligence, is once they realize they're not winning as many deals as they would like. They're not the market leader as with as much of a lead over the second place, third place, fourth place as they should have. Paying attention, companies that win pay very close attention to the competitors that they are beating on a regular basis. They wouldn't keep winning were they to not have an eye in their rear view mirror, paying attention to who's behind them. So I think the win to invest in competitive intelligence is the moment you discover that you are in a crowded market, and no matter how big your lead might be, you want to continue to maintain that lead, or no matter how big your competitor is and how far ahead they are of you, you want to be able to close some ground as quickly as you possibly can.
Okay. And what are some of the key items that should be included in the competitive intelligence research or document or whatever?
Well, I mean, the vast majority of our customers, they think about things in the way of battle cards to empower their sales team, because a sales team will view a battle card as something that is both for a training aspect of things, but they can also use it in real time on the phone with a prospect. There's also additional deliverables. So a product team would much rather see a feed of information around products and features, so they can farm through that research on their own. And then customer success team members, executive team members, they want to be delivered curated information that they can see, they can ingest, they can understand, and they can move forward. So to include within that deliverable, it varies on the audience. The sales team wants to know how the competitors are pricing what it is that they're selling. Sales team always wants to know, if I'm going to get beat, I don't want to get beat on features and functionality. I don't even really want to get beat on price. So I want to be aware of what I'm selling against, basically. You're also going to want to include other nuggets of information. Hey, did your competitor recently take on a round of funding? If they are, that seems to intimate to the market and the potential buyers that, they're going to start investing in a particular area one way or the other. Did that competitor, let's say, has there been a preponderance of reviews on G2, which is one of the big software review sites, or Glassdoor reviews, for example? Hey, employees are talking about the company. A lot of those teams pay attention to that stuff because they can farm out additional nuggets of information. Hey, there's a ton of users who aren't as big of a fan of the software this time around as it was last time. Did they do a software update? So what is actually included in the deliverables from a competitive intelligence perspective can vary based on the audience, and can get pretty broad and can expand pretty widely, depending on what market you're in and what it is, and your competitors themselves, basically.
Okay, yeah, totally makes sense. And how do we translate our research into action to move the company forward?
It's a great question. I think that some companies are better at this than others. And what I mean by that is information on its own is just words on a page, right? You've got to be able to empower and inspire the right action in the stakeholders that receive that intel, right? So what we try to do and what we encourage is this notion of using field intelligence and using that digital footprint to understand where your competitors are going to try to sow fear, uncertainty, and doubt in your prospects or your customers. That is to say that where are your competitors going to start talking trash about your company? And then be able to, and again, this is a product marketing function, not a competitive intelligence function, using our skills as product marketers to be able to speak to the features and benefits in a way that can parry or sort of reverse that FUD that your competitor may try to put in the minds of your prospects or the customers that they're trying to poach from your book of business. When it pertains to, let's say, a product team, they want to be able to know, where is your competitor hiring and what type of people are they hiring? What kind of open recs do they have? That can sort of influence a product roadmap in that, oh, these guys are hiring, Ruby on Rails developers and JavaScript developers. That seems to intimate that they're building more back-end, database work, or perhaps, they're hiring a bunch of UX developers, for example, right? So, that intimates that they're going to be, doing a pretty big refresh of whatever it is that they're selling, right? So all that information, all that intel can feed back in, and you sort of give a little push along the way, like, hey, product team, like they just hired 2 new, or they have open recs for 2 new UX designers. That seems to intimate that they are going to be, our competitor, are going to be, really doubling down on the user experience. That should, and again, that nudge to the product team should say, oh, well, perhaps we should take a look at UX as well to beat them to the punch. Or if we already have user experience updates in the roadmap, perhaps it gets bumped up a little bit earlier because we know our competitor is going to be hiring people in that space to do that work. So to inspire the right action, it does require a product marketing brain to be able to say, okay, here's some pieces of information, words on a page. What can we do about it? Who needs to know about it? And what should they do with that information? And that's what we try to do, and at least that's what I try to do. And a great many of our customers are really, really good at this, about identifying those nuggets of information, tying them together, connecting the dots, and saying, hey, team, go do something with this. So it's it'll vary from company to company, but my recommendation is you always should think about intel as the impetus for action, the inciting incident to get you to go do something, as opposed to just information that you can absorb and perhaps not do much with.
Okay. And you're talking about, fear and triggers, right? Does Crayon predict these within the tool? Is that how it works? Or how does Crayon help product marketers?
So what we do is we aggregate the intel itself, and we put it into a place for a competitive intelligence professional, product marketer, to see it and interpret it, right? So we, as a software provider, we don't know everything about our customers' businesses. What may be a really, a piece of intel in the life sciences profession, and me, I've never worked in life sciences before, I could look at that and be like, that's really relevant. But an actual product marketer in the life sciences field may look at that and say, yeah, it doesn't really mean much of anything. So we don't necessarily do that interpretation. That said, we have every one of our customers gets a competitive intelligence analyst, somebody who works for Crayon, who can help them identify those types of things. And those CIAs, those competitive intel analysts, they're basically able to start to understand what works for life sciences clients. They start to understand what works for fintech or financial services clients. They start to feed off of the reactions and the relationship that they have with their customer. So while we don't necessarily do it automatically, there's always a human element to competitive intelligence. our competitive insights analysts will basically start flagging things and say, hey, you may want to pay attention to this. This could be important. And then suddenly they start to understand what actually is important from, having built that rapport and having built that relationship.
Yeah, okay, got it. And how often should we update our competitive intel research? Let's talk about, 6 months or 1 year. How often?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think competitive intelligence is something that can be done and could be done in real time.
Yeah.
We'll regularly get intel on a Monday, and I'll be able to have it turned around, have some takeaways added, have some additional action, inspiration to action by Tuesday morning, right? I mean, that is something that can happen instantaneously using our software. But not everybody uses our software. Not everybody does competitive intelligence the way we do it, and that's okay.
Yeah.
We'll get there. So I think, look, if you can pay attention to what's going on within the digital footprint, or talk with your sales team or your customer success team, anybody who is, who has a relationship with people outside of your four walls, and start, compiling, spending at least an hour a week, maybe 2 hours, every fortnight, or, 3 hours a month of your 40-hour work week, 80 hours every 2 weeks, and, however long you work a month, and just like dedicate some time to it. Jotting things down, taking down notes, putting things in a farm will, a well of links, basically, that says, hey, here's 3 articles that seem to confirm to me that this may be happening. This could be true. Here's 2 different pieces of intel that I got from a sales team member to customer success team member that seems to intimate to me that this could be true. And if you dedicate a certain amount of time and, really stay focused on it, an hour a week, 2 hours every 2 weeks, maybe, you spend a little bit of time and you start to curate and craft and understand what your competitors are up to, then, my gosh, it really will pay dividends. It really does make a difference. Even if you're not doing it in real time, even if you're just having your finger on the pulse of what it is the market is doing, it's going to be beneficial. It really will be. And, I can't tell you how frequently we hear it from our clients, but also I hear it out from other, product marketers who aren't using my product. They say, look, our sales team just loves the fact that they know something that their prospect doesn't know about the competitor who's also in that deal. They love it. They love going in and they love saying, like, hey, did you know XYZ about the other solution that you're considering? Oh, no, I didn't know that. I'll go back and ask them about that, right? Like, the sales teams love that. And that leads to increased win rates. That leads to increased, a better win-loss ratio against your competition. So, I mentioned this earlier. I think CI certainly can be measured in real time, but if you don't have that capability, if you don't have that kind of time, just dedicating a small portion of your week, of your month, of your fortnight to, to doing a little bit of that work, it really will pave the way for, greater success down the road, or greater investment in a competitive intelligence program, period.
Okay. And do you have any tips on decoding our competitors' strategy or product roadmap?
Yeah, that type of stuff is always a little bit more difficult to find, a little difficult to ascertain. And it's usually all about sort of connecting dots, right? So content marketers, people who do, blog posts and they put together content, downloadable content pieces, they're often the last to know about a product roadmap. But when they are let in on the secret, hey, this is what we're going to be doing over the next 12 to 18 months, that usually starts to influence the content strategy. Because if a company is going to come out with a brand new set of features or a new thing, they're going to break into a new market, the content team will usually start, seeding the ground and start talking about what that thing is that they're going to be doing down the road. They start putting out blog posts. They start, try to build a little bit of thought leadership to lay some groundwork. So then when the new big feature, the new roadmap update happens 3, 4, 5, 6 months later, there's already 3 or 4 or 5 months worth of content that sort of gives that company a little bit of a, they prove out their bona fides. Hey, we know what we're talking about with this new feature because we've been blogging about it for the past 3 to 4 months. We don't just have this new thing that we don't have any groundwork laid. Like we already have some notional awareness of this, and we are already an industry expert, even though the product just came out today. So in order to ascertain or sort of try to understand what your competitor's product roadmap is, I try to tell competitive intelligence pros, like, start paying attention to the content. Like if that's a blog post that comes out that seems like pretty far away from what their current, what their current product is, and then you see another blog post on that topic 3 weeks later, it's like, oh, interesting. And then there's a downloadable piece of content a month after that. At some point, you have to start to say, man, they're talking about this very frequently. And you sort of have to ask yourself why. And the answer to that quite often is, hey, there's something on their roadmap that they are building towards. And part of their building towards it is the content team is starting to, sort of seed that ground. So that's one answer to your question. Another answer is field intelligence, right? If you got sales teams in the field and they are talking to prospects and the prospect is saying, oh, well, your competitor says they're going to be doing this in the next 6 months, it's incumbent upon your sales team to like jot that down, record that soundbite, like get that up into your competitive intelligence framework, that structure, because that could be it could be crap, right? That may not be true at all. But if you hear that more than once, once is an anomaly, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is a trend. So if you hear it a couple of times, then it starts to become a reality, perhaps. So back to the first question you had asked me, like, how does a CI, a product marketer start a CI program? And I said, you really got to pursue one of 2 avenues, field intelligence or a digital footprint. Tying it back to the answer to that question, how do you understand a competitor's product roadmap? It's really one of those 2 avenues. Once again, it's understanding what the field intel is telling you, what the sales guys, customer success team perhaps know, and they can bubble it back up to you, or what the digital footprint might be telling you, and the content team at your competitor who's already starting to talk about subjects they're probably not at liberty to talk about, but they're doing so in anticipation of a big release.
Okay. And I always thought that, competitive intelligence is a one-off thing where you just sit for 2-3 weeks, you do the research, gather information, put down everything in a deck or something, and then pass it on to the sales team. And that's it. And like, you don't go back to that like for 3 months or 6 months. And then once in every 6 months, you go back and update the deck. That's how I always thought, but this is very interesting. Do you think this is a bad thing to do? Because I'm a single product marketer in the company. I don't have a team. I'm the only one, working with the product team, helping with the launches, GTM, and I'm working with the sales team, helping them with assets. I'm working with the success team. So I might not have the time to update these intelligence documents every week, right? So what can I do? What is the better way for me to focus on competitive intelligence?
So if your company or any of your viewers, any of your companies is in a very small market, if you only have one other competitor, then competitive intelligence really doesn't need to be as real time as those companies who have multiple competitors or in very competitive markets, right? So, and Jana, to your point, like, you may have thought that competitive intelligence was one of those things that you do once a quarter or infrequently. That could be true. If your real true competition is, it's a competition of one, then, you really could dedicate enough time and really build a quarterly or a monthly report about what it is they're up to and, distribute that to your team. I think more and more, and I mentioned this earlier, I think more and more we're finding that markets are expanding. People are trying to find, or business entrepreneurs are trying to find those markets where there's only one established player, there's 2 established players, and they're trying to be that third or fourth or that second disruptor. So I think what we're finding is that like that's a very rare thing to be, alone in an industry. So anyways, to your point, as a single product marketer who's trying to help with go-to-market, trying to help with product launches, trying to help the sales team with enablement, it's about like taking that 1 hour a week, 2 hours every 2 weeks, maybe 4 hours a month that you do dedicate to competitive intelligence, and try to take a nugget, take a piece of intel, take a piece of information, something that you've learned from those efforts, and insert it into the other things that you are already doing. So that is to say that your sales team comes to you and says, hey, we need some collateral that does this, collateral that says this. We need to update the deck, the PowerPoint slides. Okay, that's great. In the back of your mind, you know that this team is somehow selling against a competitor. How do you know how your competitor is selling? What is their pricing, packaging, positioning? And is there a way that you can, differentiate your product better in the eyes of a prospect against or in light of an understanding of what it is your competition is doing? And you would already be doing that work regardless, but you're now having competitive intelligence help you along the way and give you a little extra edge, an extra leg up in those efforts. When it comes to go-to-market, when it comes to product strategy and getting a new product to market, does your competitor already have that product? Do they already have that feature? How do they talk about that feature? How do they talk about that product? It's now incumbent upon you as you're doing this work to think about it a little bit differently, because product differentiation is what's going to make a prospect go with your product as opposed to your competitors. So in an answer to your question, which is more about the specifics, I'm one product marketer, how do I do all of this? It's really continuing to do what you would already be doing, your existing job of helping with go-to-market and helping with sales enablement, but letting competitive intelligence influence that in some form or fashion. Helping understand what your competitors, how they go to market, how they talk about their products and features, and helping influence your work to make it more differentiated and to give your sales team a leg up and give your product team the ability to have something new and unique in the market, even though perhaps there's already something out there that looks and works just like it.
Okay, yeah, got it. Makes sense. Like it's always best to keep a tab on our competitors every week, so we are well informed. Even though we are working on, it could be a feature launch or it could be any other enablement material, but the influence will be there when we have a tab on our competitors. Yeah, I totally get that. And you know what, we have reached the end of the conversation. I have exhausted all the questions that I had for you today, and this was so intelligent, and I learned a ton from this conversation. So thank you so much for doing this with me. I loved your energy and enthusiasm throughout the conversation. And I'll give your LinkedIn profile link in the description so people can connect with you later. And yeah, it was nice talking to you, Erik. Talk to you again soon.
Sanjana, thank you so much. And I also want to plug Crayon. You can find us at crayon.co, competitive intelligence software, the market leader as voted by G2 and by Forrester and by the Product Marketing Alliance. So we'd love to be able to speak with you about that. Hit me up on LinkedIn or find us at crayon.co. But once again, thank you so much for having me. It was a blast. I loved this conversation, and I would do this again tomorrow, although tomorrow is Saturday, so perhaps next week. How about that?
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Erik. It was nice talking to you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.